Here's a representation from ancient Egypt. These are representations of Horus. There's a lot of evidence that many of the ideas we have about Christ are derivatives of Egyptian ideas. Most people who point it out in a manner that's aimed at devaluing the ideas that were derived from Egypt, because they have an a priori motive, which is a destructive motive. As mythology progresses across the centuries, it transforms itself. It attempts to continually encapsulate and re-encapsulate the primary ideas that the human race has managed to produce about the structure of reality itself. There's constancies across these cultural manifestations because the reality to which they refer is actually reality. Horus. This is a good lesson, and I'll leave you with this. Horus is the I. The I is not the intellect. The intellect is the thing that forces everything into a pre-existing structure. And it crunches reality to do that. It warps it and twists it. And it makes people ideological and rigid. The I is something completely different. The I is the thing that pays attention. And your attention is automatically directed to those elements of your experiential field where the most information is manifesting itself. That's why, for example, if you're talking to someone in a bar and there's a TV flickering, you can't help but look at the TV. The change, the transformation is what your nervous system is attuned to. And the theory is that if you're a follower of Horus, who's the I and the falcon, because falcons can see and they fly above everything else, if you're a follower of Horus, you pay attention. When you pay attention, you absorb information. When you absorb information, you continually transform yourself. And that keeps you on top of an ever-shifting reality. Doing that is meaningful, and that's what stops you from becoming bitter and cruel. Because, life is suffering, and if you don't have an antidote to that suffering that's real, then you become resentful about the structure of experience, and then you'll do everything you can to take revenge on it. And we saw what happened when people did that in the 20th century. And it would be a good thing if people woke up and stopped doing it. And as far as I can tell, after trying to figure this out for like 30 years, the way that you do that is by paying attention and transforming yourself when it's necessary and stopping the process of identifying with what you already believe. Who the hell cares what you believe? You should be attending to the things you don't know, which is a much larger space than the things you know. And then you should be construing yourself not as the inhabitant of a sterile and static and already completed structure, but as the thing that lives on the edge of that, that's constantly building and rebuilding it. And then if something happens to your structure, it's not so relevant because that's not what you are. You're the thing that can engage in transformations of structure by paying attention. And that's what these representations mean. These are Renaissance pictures, They've elevated the entity that voluntarily accepts the necessity of suffering and death, so that's represented by Christ, to the highest position in the heavenly hierarchy. What that idea means is that what should constitute the transcendent value that sits above all other values is your capacity to voluntarily accept the restricted and painful conditions of your life, to face them, and as a consequence of facing them, immediately transcend them. Now, one of the things we know from clinical psychology is that if you have someone who's afraid, they avoid. So what do you do about that? You break down the thing they're afraid of till you find a small unit that they can approach. When they approach it, they learn that they can approach it and that they're more than they thought they were. And then they can approach the next thing and then the next thing. And so you take a woman who's got agoraphobia who can't get in an elevator, and a week later she can, and then she goes home and has the fight with her husband that she should have had 20 years ago. And the reason for that is that when she's exposed to the things that she's afraid of, instead of running from them, she learns that she's the thing that can be exposed to things she's afraid of. She doesn't learn that things aren't frightening. And learning that she's the thing that can be exposed to things that are frightening makes her more than the frightening things. And it's certainly possible that we're more than the things that frighten us. If we weren't, we wouldn't be here. We shouldn't throw these things away before we understand them, and we're in danger of doing that now. So part of what I've been trying to do in my lectures and my work is to point out what our forefathers knew, to try to help modern people understand it, and to make the case that these things that we think of as non-real representations are more real than anything that we currently comprehend as real. The consequences of not comprehending them and living by them, as far as I can tell, is that things deteriorate, and they can deteriorate to a point where everything is intolerable for everyone. And that seems to be a suboptimal destination. So, thanks for the invitation.